Right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, I am very excited as a Mets fan for our guest today. This is a guy who basically was a sports mad kid from New Jersey and became like family to generations of big leaguers. And I'm very excited that we're going to have him on the show today.
Yes, I'm very excited too. So normally we've been doing sports media personalities, which includes play-by-play guys, on-air broadcasters. Very interesting today. We're finally going into dip into our feet into the world of PR. So our guest today was the former New York Mets head of media relations for almost 40 years. He was there 39 years. In the 2018, he shifted exclusively to PR director for Alumni Relations. So hopefully Mets legends going forward will continue to get the due that they deserve, kind of like how we treat Yankees legends, over, one borough over. But I'm really, really, really excited. Also a book writer. So I believe that is a first for our show too. So I'm very, very excited about our very special guest here today, Mr. Jay Horwitz. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate you. Thank you, man.
Yes. How are you today?
Good. I'm good. Thanks.
So Jay,
waiting to get safe. Hopefully,
absolutely.
Sometimes. Hopefully.
We'll see how it goes. Guys. Were you at the ballpark at all this past season, or are you staying home?
I went to spring training. We had started a program in 2019 of bringing the alumni to the home games and spring training. So in late February of this spring, I brought Mike Hampton and Glendon Rush from the 2000 team championship down to spring training to do some autographs and mingle with the guys. And about 10 days after I get back to Citi Field, the world changed, So I really haven't been back to Citi Field since March. And I didn't go to any of the games because in my new job, I'm not involved in the day-to-day activity, the game thing. So, I wasn't in the right tier. So I stayed away because of my age and safety. So really, I haven't been back since March the 4th, last time I've been at Citi Field.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And the 20-year anniversary of the 2000 team. So we didn't really get a proper celebration this year, unfortunately, with everything going on. But I remember seeing Mike Hampton down there, and it was great that Mike Hampton ended up signing with the Rockies because we got David Wright, who I know you have a very close relationship with.
Right.
And I want to just get into, real quick here. I follow you on Twitter. I think you're one of the funniest guys on Twitter.
I kind of calmed down a little bit.
You calmed down.
I'm not as...
following you when you were on the road and going to Colorado, losing shoes, losing belts and stuff. I mean, that was great.
Tell you when almost got me fired.
Yes.
Somebody got me fired. It was we're in Colorado, and I said something like, "I got the flu now. On my way to get some medical marijuana. They say it helps." My bosses weren't too happy. And what was the last year, the Red Sox, when they won the World Series? Was it in 18?
12 or 13?
Yeah.
18.
18.
So I tweeted out something, all is forgiven. Mookie will throw out first pitch in Fenway Park to Buckner. It should be a great sight. And Bill Buckner, God rest his soul, got calls in Utah. So I kind of, my bosses were really happy that I kind of low-key my Twitter feed now.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, one of my favorite things was I think when you guys were in Colorado and Sandy was on the field shoveling the snow, and you were giving some updates on that. That must have been wild.
Yeah, but I try to have fun with it, but sometimes they're a little bit too crazy. But now I just really tweet alumni stuff and and stuff with players. So I matured in my old age.
Who from the organization told you to get on Twitter, or was that your idea?
To get on, well, actually, I got on Twitter. It was kind of a very great reason. Well, I have a chapter in my book about Shannon Ford, my dear associate who worked for me for 22 years and unfortunately died of breast cancer at the age of 40 at 44. 2 young kids left. So Jeff Wilpon said to me, if you can get over 10,000 followers, that I'm going to make a $10,000 donation to the Hackensack Cancer Foundation in Shannon's name. So about 2 or 3 days, I called in everybody, Dwight, all the guys who tweeted. They tweeted. I got over we got to 10,000 followers in about a day or two, Jeff gave me the check, and unfortunately, I tweeted the check, and it had the check number of our head accountant went over on Twitter, so he really wasn't too crazy about that. But that's how I got on Twitter. So
Yeah,
that was a good story.
Speaking of Shannon Ford, I know you got the initiative started to get Shannon Ford Field made, and you did the first donation, and MLB's Play Initiative,
Right.
their charity auction continued that. What was the process like there in getting that project completed?
Well, it was Major League Baseball. When Shannon passed away in March of 2016, 9 Major League teams held a moment of silence for her, which is pretty remarkable. Shannon had unique quality of being, as a PR person, you have really 3 masters. Number 1 is ownership. You have the press, the media, you have the coaches and the players. And Shannon had the unique ability of being friendly with everyone. No one said a bad word about Shannon Ford. So when she died, our friends in MLB, came to me. We held an auction at the winter meetings that year, and we raised about $350,000 with MLB's help. And in the last couple of years, we have the Shannon Dorton Field at Little Ferry. College teams play there, high school teams play there, and Shannon was a good athlete. She loved to play softball. So instead of having a plaque or flowers or something, it's a great tribute to her, and it's just a couple of blocks of where she grew up in Little Ferry. So it's a really nice tribute for her.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you mentioned that you did put the chapter on her in the book. What was it like writing that book? What made you decide that you wanted to, after all these years, sit down and write it?
Yeah, it's a couple of reasons why I wrote the book. I've been fortunate enough through the years to work with a lot of great people, players like, Gary Carter, Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, David Wright, Al Leiter, Johnny Franco. And one of my things, I was always able not to take myself seriously. So they told me that I had a lot of good, funny stories, and I wanted to write a feel-good book about what we did at 9/11, sitting in Davy Johnson's office, the 6th game of the World Series there. And there was another part of it was, in my book, I mentioned, I was born blind in my right eye. When my mother carried me, she got German measles, and I had glaucoma. And so I was, I had one blue eye and one green eye growing up. When I was about 12 or 13 in 6th grade, the doctor said to me, "You're going to have your eye removed, because if you don't, it'll spread to the other eye. You'll be completely blind." So when I was 12 or 13, I had an artificial eye put in. And I was always too embarrassed for some reason. I don't know to this day why, to say anything. And I said, one of the reasons I wanted to write this book is maybe of somebody who's born, not perfect, maybe they have some kind of disability. They can know that, the future's not completely dark. You can build a career for yourself. So I'm hoping, somebody who reads the book will say, "Hey, listen, this guy was born with one eye. He made a decent career for himself." That was really one of the side reasons why I wrote the book, to maybe can be some kind of inspiration to some young person growing up.
Yeah, Jay, Joe chiming in again. My dad actually has glaucoma, and he's legally blind in his left eye. So I personally know that the challenges somebody like that can face. So when you were a kid, obviously, you decided to go on a different path per se. You were a huge sports fan. You wanted to be an athlete. You knew that wasn't really in the cards for you. So at what point when you were younger, in your younger years, did you feel like, okay, this is the transition that I need to make? This is the fork in the road, so to speak, where your life's going to pivot and you're going to go in this direction and you're going to pursue that direction. Was it in high school for you? Was it even younger than that?
It was in high school. Growing up? It was in high school. I was very introverted growing up because, and kids can be cruel. If you're not perfectly, the kids can make fun of you. You make fun. I had 2 different colored eyes. And that's why I love Max Scherzer, even though he pitches for Washington. He has 2 different color eyes. But all of my friends were athletes. I knew I could never be a great athlete. I played Little League baseball, and one story that I didn't really see the ball that well. The only time I used to be able to hit it, I used to bunt. So one time my father said to me, "If you don't swing away, I'm not going to let you play anymore. So I swung away this one time, hit a line drive to center field, trip coming out of the batter's box, make a long story short, the center fielder threw me out at first base. When I got to high school, I became a manager. I managed basketball, baseball, track, cross country. At the senior dedication in the auditorium, I had more stripes on my sleeve than a starting quarterback. I remember one of the cheerleaders said to me, as I went up to get my sweater, "Who the hell is this guy?" I had like 8 or 9 stripes on my sweater because I was a manager for all the sports. Then when I went to NYU, I became the basketball manager. So I did the next best thing. And my involvement with sports helped make me more outgoing. I was able to make friends because of that. I really got out of my shell because I used the sports as a vehicle, to do stuff, which even though I know I couldn't be an athlete, so this was the next best thing. And that's, when I went to NYU, I studied journalism, and I wanted to be a press secretary. I was a diehard Kennedy fan growing up. I believed in Camelot, and I wanted to be, Pierre Salinger and Frank Makowitz, but I got diverted. I did some early campaigning in politics, but I went to work for a small newspaper in New Jersey, and I've been involved with sports ever since. It's really helped bring me out of my shell, and it just really, I had an alternate lifestyle. Like I said, I knew I couldn't be an athlete, so I did the next best thing to be involved with sports.
So you mentioned NYU, you're there studying journalism, you get your master's degree there as well in history, and then you become the sports information director. Is that something where they were just kind of getting started in that role, or is that something that just came open?
Yeah, I had been around the teams because I was the basketball manager. We traveled around the country, and Ben Carnival, who was the athletic director at the time, asked me if I wanted to become the sports information director, and I did. I was there for a couple of years, and I was there from I was going for my master's. I was actually working there, and then they all of a sudden in 1971 they dropped basketball. It wasn't financially feasible for them, and then in the winter of '72, I got a call from a guy named Don Sherlock. There was a who worked as a sports editor at the Bergen Record, and it was an opening for the SID at Fairleigh Dickinson. I went over and interviewed for the job, and I had 8 glorious years here at Fairleigh Dickinson. I really wasn't looking to leave, but actually before I got the job with the Mets, I had taken a job as the stat guy for Tony Kubek and Joe Garagiola on the NBC Game of the Week. And about a month after I took the job, I got the call from the Mets, and I've been here 40 plus years since.
Yeah, it's you become the director of public relations. So what was the process like to I guess interview for that job and then ultimately get started? And in the 80s, very different time as compared to today with media availability and whatnot. So what were the standard day-to-day practices back when you started in the early 80s?
You mean how I got the job?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I actually, after I took the job with NBC, I got a call from a guy said, "I'm Jim Nagurney from the New York Mets. We heard some stuff that you've done at Fairleigh Dickinson." Let me just digress 1 second. When I was at Fairleigh Dickinson, we had a one-arm fencer, an Arab Israeli goalie on the soccer team. A baseball player was hit by a pitch 128 times. Freshman football player was 43 years old. Priester played hockey. So I made my living publicizing kind of the offbeat personality. And the Mets at that time weren't very good, and they were looking for an offbeat PR guy. And when I first got the call, I hung up on the guy because I thought it was a friend of mine. And the next day he called me back, and I said, "I apologize. You still want to talk to me?" So I figured I had nothing to lose. So I flew down to St. Petersburg, Florida. Went to the wrong hotel. I was supposed to go to the Hyatt. I went to the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and I was late for the interview. And there was Frank Casher, the general manager of the Mets, sitting there in his little white tennis shorts. And I was so nervous, I spilled a huge container of orange juice all over his lap. He asked me one question, and I said, and I didn't get the answer right. He said, "Well, this is the end of your interview." And I remember calling my late mother back, going on the way to the airport. She says, "Mom, there's no way I got the job." So the Mets in the early 80s, I did a lot of the stuff with the Mets then as I did with Fairleigh Dickinson. We had Lee Mazzilli, who was a championship speed skater, Doug Flynn, who sang with the Oak Ridge Boys, Craig Swan, who is a physical therapist in the off season. But it really all changed for me. The first inkling would be a new change was in October of '83 when we hired Davey Johnson to be the manager. Davey was a multi-millionaire. He's a real estate guy, brilliant mathematician, graduate of Texas A&M. And when he got the job, he said, "Guys, why did it take you so long to name me as a manager of the Mets?" And he was the perfect thing we needed. He was outspoken. He was cocky. He was confident. And then slowly but surely, the pieces started to come. And in '83, we added Darryl the Strawberry first, called him up in Florida. Then came Keith. And in '84, it was Darlene, Sid Fernandez, Dwight. And then from '84 to '90, we owned New York. We were, was really a Mets town and not a Yankees town. And that's how I got there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, starting in the late 80s and right through the 90s, early 2000s, you're on WFAN, and there's two very powerful men out there, Mike and the Mad Dog. So they obviously, whatever happens, they were going to react to things. How did that, that sports media and radio, particularly WFAN, play into how you're managing things in the public eye? Are you going directly and giving them things sometimes, or are you working in partnership with them to kind of mold the stories?
Well, I was from the old ilk that I don't really like to. There's so much media in New York, you really get into trouble when you leak stuff. You make one guy happy and 30 guys unhappy. So, Mike and Chris were really good friends with me. I still maintain a relationship with the both of them. They moved on to different things, and I just try to make our players accessible to them when they need it. If we weren't playing well, I try to make sure our players were out there and talking to them, and we had to be. We just couldn't hide when things were bad. That was always my philosophy. It's easy to get guys to talk when things are good. You establish credibility in the market when the players talk and are available when things are bad. And Mike has always been a good friend. I had no problems with the way they treated us when we were good. We said good things. They were bad. They said bad things, and you can't expect anything more, especially in this market, going forward.
Who was a player or coach that was always willing to, step to the mic, do press for you guys? And is there anybody that was like very anti, like they didn't want to speak to the media at all?
I was really lucky. Most of the guys I've dealt with, and one thing, my success, somebody asked me today, how did I succeed in the locker room for 40 years? You have to have a level of trust with the players. And I always try to treat the 25th guy in the team like the number one guy in the team. Like early on, you had Carter and that '86 team that were successful. That's why to this day, even though Darryl and Doc had troubles off the field, they're still beloved in the city because they never went away from anything. Getting through guys like Al Leiter and Johnny Franco and David Wright to this day. And one of my favorites is Jacob deGrom. We had Jacob and I had a special relationship together. I'm a lot older than Jacob, so I try to let him know I wasn't a suit. And when his first, when Rookie of the Year in 2014, and his first two Cy Youngs, I was with him, and we would have to play this game with each other. He, one thing about Jacob again, Jacob doesn't look for the publicity. He's not a tweeter. He doesn't have a lot of commercials. All he wants to do is pitch. So I would go to him and say, especially the second Cy Young Award, I say, Jake, we have to do a lot of different things now because you're only going to have 10 or 11 wins. We have to get the message out that the ERA and your scoreless streak, your hits to inning streaker. And he said, okay, Jay, I'll do the interview for you, but you have to do something for me. So we had this basketball net in the middle of the clubhouse. He said, if you make 2 or 3 shots, I'll do the interview for you. I never did, but I went through that process to let them know I wasn't an old suit, even though I was, 30 plus years older than him. I could take a joke. Another time I asked him for an interview. He said, well, you have to go on the field and Steven Matz and myself, Fungos, And if you could do hit 10 straight balls, I'll do an interview for you. That never happened, but it did interview for me. So what I'm trying to say is, I was never afraid not to make fun of myself, to laugh at myself, and let the guys know I had your backs. And that was really, how I existed in the locker room for so long.
Yeah, Jay, you were talking about philosophies before. Obviously, Nick and I coming from a communications background too. I think a lot of stuff has started to overlap, but I think the core stuff that you learn always sticks with you and can apply to different professions and different roles within the industry. And you are a big proof of that. So you talked about obviously Doc and Darryl Strawberry and the challenges that they have faced throughout their personal lives, for the better part of their lives. And then you talk about Jacob deGrom, who is total 180, the opposite, right? So over the course of your 40 years, you've had to deal with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities at a lot of different times. But take us away from the field now. Take us behind the scenes. Which people do you think who worked alongside you, who possibly worked under you, or who worked above you? What other people do you feel like were the most instrumental in your day-to-day duties, and who were the most important people that you worked with during your time at the Mets?
Well, number one, I mean, I say number one, Shannon Ford was like the daughter I never had, 22 years with me, a dedicated charity person, balancing the young family with working and getting sick. And I'll never forget in the 2015 World Series, she willed herself when cancer was spreading all over her body to come and work the series. People like Dennis DiAgostino and, Ethan Wilson, today are just great people. And Frank Cashin for taking a chance on an untried, kid coming from Fairleigh Dickinson. And, I love the managers I worked with. Starting with Joe Torre, my first manager. Joe told me what it was like to be in a major league clubhouse. And, Willie Randolph, who to this day, I don't know why he's never gotten another job. Bobby Valentine, my good friend Terry Collins, and Art Howe, people like that. And, when people understand, you develop these relationships. Like when people get let go. I remember it being in Art Howe's office the day he got fired. You still, you feel emotion, you cry on your shoulders. It was a bond, and I've been lucky, really very blessed to even. I know you guys are too young to remember. Dave Kingman had the reputation of not being not liking the media, but when he came over here, he lived in my house for a couple of weeks in the summer in 1981. And it's just a question of getting these guys to trust you. And that's what I try to do. But I really, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of great people, through the years with the Mets.
Jay, I unfortunately have to ask you about when Willie Randolph was fired in the middle of the night in California. We had Evan Roberts on the show with us a few weeks ago. He says you blamed him and Joe Beningo for the firing. Is that true?
No, I never did. No, I never did. I mean, we honestly, that was one of the worst things I was ever a part of. I mean, Willie, we flew across country. It was Father's Day, and we got to California. We got the call. We had to do the release, and it was terrible. That was one of the worst things I was ever a part of. But no, I didn't. I think Evan. I never did. I mean, Joe and I, we used to go back and forth with Evan and Joe, and I know they're both big Met fans. And
they were following you. They followed you guys out there to California. They were tracking. They did. Everything,
they did.
Making you guys nervous. But I agree. Willie definitely should have 100% gotten another job. I mean, it's mind-boggling, but
it's a crime.
I never understood that either as a Yankee guy too.
He's a good baseball guy, and he really should be involved with baseball some way. It's too bad.
No doubt about it. Now we were talking about players being accessible to the media. How did you handle requests for people to speak to players who only spoke Spanish or Japanese? And to speak of Japanese, I remember 2000 when Shinjo came over. That was like media frenzy. How'd you handle that, and what was your thoughts?
Well, we had an interpreter. One thing, the Japanese players are always accessible. They, a lot of these guys speak every day, I mean, they, when we got Yoshi, the pitcher, and Nomo, they're conditioned to speak every day. So we have the interpreter. So, they did a press conference every day. God bless them. It was just, I mean, really, like Ray Ordonez didn't really use an interpreter to speak, but guys like Jose Reyes taught himself English. But with things, there really wasn't that many who didn't really, didn't like. I remember the Japanese guys used an interpreter, as did Ray Ordonez, but all the guys were very accessible. Again, it goes back to one thing: letting the players know you have their best interest. And if I come to them with something, they understood why I did, and they were 99 times of 100. They were always accessible to me.
That's great that they were always like willing to go out there and speak. We mentioned some guys here. Ray Ordonez was someone that Joe wanted to ask you about. I want to ask you about some random Mets who maybe they didn't play long, but for me as a kid, when I first started watching the team, I don't know why I just remember these guys so fondly. Bubba Trammell. What do you remember about him?
I remember Bubba Trammell because we had injuries in 2000. He got a good right-handed bat. We got from the Yankees. I think he got some big hits down the end, and he started a couple of key games in the playoffs in the World Series.
Jason Phillips.
He was a bullpen catcher for a while. I think he got the 5,000th home run in Mets history, if I remember serves correctly. And he used to wear those big glasses, and he's made a nice career for himself with a bullpen coach, and out in Seattle. Got a lot of big hits.
Butch Husky.
Butch Husky, one of my favorite guys. Really wore number 42, a great sense of history. I remember one spring he got like 5 or 6 home runs, and unfortunately, I think what hurt Butch a lot, he switched around his positions. He played first base, third base, right field. He never had one position, but Butch had a nice career for us, and he wore 42 as a tribute to Jackie Robinson, and he's doing very well in private business in Oklahoma now.
All right, just a few more here. Lastings Millage.
Lastings had a kind of mercurial career. He had a very outgoing personality. I remember one day he got into trouble when he was shaking hands or yelling at the fans in right field after he hit a home run. And probably one guy who probably never lived up to his expectations.
Victor Diaz.
The outfielder?
Yes.
He hit a big home run. I forget, against the Cubs. It was a 3-run home. Came back from big deficit at Shea one day. I don't remember too much about it. I know he was a big hitter. He hit a couple big homers. One particular day he hit a home run in the 8th or 9th inning that got us a win.
Jason Tyner.
Boy, Jason Tyner, you really reached back into the pit.
I was so mad when he got traded to the Yankees. I was heartbroken.
Left-handed batter again. Never really didn't have a great career, unfortunately.
He went like thousands of games without a home run, which is crazy. All right. And then the last guy, I just want to ask you about, this guy at his age 40 season in 1990 was really good with the Mets, but how was it like dealing with Ricky Henderson on a daily basis?
I love Ricky Henderson. Ricky always used to talk in the third person, and he was great with our younger guys. He liked to teach. He loved baseball, and he had a really, had a big home run for us in the game at Cincinnati '99, and I love Ricky. Ricky had a thing in spring training. They used to ask him for his autograph. He says Ricky doesn't sign autographs on Monday. He would come back on Tuesday. He said Ricky doesn't sign autographs on Tuesdays, but he always used to speak in the third person, and I love Ricky Henderson.
So obviously it's like a trip down memory lane here. So how are you enjoying your new role in Alumni Relations, and are you ready to have a key role in getting together that old timers game that our new owner Steve Cohen says is going to happen?
I mean, I honestly, when they first offered me the job, when Jeff asked me to switch, I wasn't crazy about it because I like to travel, I like the camaraderie in the locker room. But after I've been doing this for 2+ years, I think we're doing some great things. We're bringing some of the older players back to the Mets family. I'll give you a quick, for instance, Hobie Landris was the first Mets player taken in 1991. When I called him about a year ago, he said I was the first person from the Mets organization to call him in 50 years. So it's just reaching out to the guys, bringing them to spring training, bringing them to Citi Field, helping Ed Cranepool get a kidney, give me some work to Cleon Jones, what he's doing down in Mobile, charity work, helping celebrate Jerry Kuzma, getting him some well-deserved credit. So it's really, I find it very rewarding to letting these older guys know that we give a damn and making them a part of the Mets family. I'm very, very rewarding now.
Yeah, it's very proud. So my partner over there, he's been wanting to know that Tom Seaver statue. Do you have any word on the updated schedule?
Yeah,
What's the timeline like?
what's good? We had some communications with the Seaver family, and the statue was going to be ready for opening day, but the family wanted to not to do it until the fans were there, could be part of the festivities. So in bowing to them, we're gonna we could have, it's gonna be ready early on, but they didn't want to have the thing unveiled so fans could participate and be a part of the ceremony. But rest assured, it's going to be available at some point next year.
Excellent. And you're also a podcast host of the amazing Mets Alumni podcast, which I'm a big fan of.
I do.
Any upcoming episodes, and who would you like to ideally have on as a guest that you haven't had yet?
Well, hopefully in the next week or so, I'm going to get Jose Reyes on to talk about his music career, and I try to get like a lot of these guys, like some maybe guys are not, people haven't heard from more. Like I had, John Maine on a couple of weeks ago. With John Maine, I pitched a lot of big games for the Mets in 2006. I had Todd Hundley on recently. I think I've gone through all the Piazzas, the Goods, the Strawberries, the Francos, the Lighters. I'm just trying to reach back in Mets history and get guys who, people might be familiar with and haven't heard from a while, and guys like Joe Youngblood and Doug Flynn and guys like that.
So, Jay, I wanted to specifically ask you because I think when you retrace Mets history, most of the turning points kind of correlate to big trades happening, right? So you could go back to the 80s and you could go back to Keith and you can go back to Gary Carter. In the 90s, it was very clearly Mike Piazza, and Mike and Chris are always personally responsible. They're always saying how they were the ones who brought Piazza to New York, and whether that's true or not, that's up for debate. I remember Johan Santana when the Mets acquired him. That was a huge deal. So what was it like being in the building from your perspective through those major trades and those major turning points in franchise history? Because they all correlated in one way or another with something that eventually led to a World Series run. In Santana's case, which was the more recent run, there was a little more space in between from when the Mets got Santana and that run in 2015. But for the most part, those trades were the catalyst, so to speak, of really good periods in Mets history. So what was it like working for the Mets specifically during the times of those trades, and then stuff dealing with the fallout?
Well, it was exciting to write those releases. And really, the first trade that really got us started was June of 1969, when we got Don Clendenin from the Expos. That was really led to the championship there. But it was always exciting to write about, when Mike came, when we got him in the late 90s, he was like a rock star coming into the building. We had the press conference in the old Jets locker room was packed, and signing the Santana contract, and when we re-signed Mike back again, it was a 7-year contract. It was just exciting to be part of that, and writing the releases to, I always like to be where the action is, and every time you make one of those big signings, you have, whether it's Beltran or Pedro or Delgado, it excites excitement in the press, and I love the back pages. I always, even though we never played the Yankees, I love competing with the Yankees for getting the back pages. If we got on a week, if we got 4 back pages, the Yankees got 3, I consider that a moral victory. So it was just an exciting time to write the releases, to set up the press conference the next day to, to let the media know to come in. And after that, you have they want to go somebody's home to do stuff about their family. So it kept you busy, and it was really, it was really good to be part of all the big stuff that happened through the years.
Yeah, and another guy that got the franchise buzzing, Yoenis Cespedes. He comes over, and who could forget that run with him? And that was, I'm sure there was some crazier times dealing with him off the field. But we also got the 15-year anniversary of 2006 team, which was absolutely dominant and should have won a World Series. The stadium was shaking like crazy when Andy Chavez makes that catch.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get Andy Chavez on a future Mets alumni podcast. We saw him recently do the SNY thing. But, something I got to ask you about that season is you get the news that Dwayner Sanchez is in an injury in a taxi cab in
Miami, right?
Yeah, I think that kind of changed the course of things moving forward here. But what do you remember from that period when you got to put out a release? He's out for the season, and that ultimately led to some key trades to get the team.
Yeah, we got Oliver Perez and Hernandez. What's his first name again from the Pirates? Who went on to pitch well for us. So, yeah, Dwyer was pitching lights out
Hernandez
that time. It just goes back to one thing: you never know what to expect. That's why I love my job. Every day was different. When the phone rang, you never knew what the hell was going to happen. Early in the morning, late at night. Especially in the '80s, it always kept you hopping. But it was just a crazy time. But we rebounded well that year, and unfortunately, what I feel badly about is that Carlos Beltran's gotten a lot of criticism for not taking that hellacious pitch by Wainwright. But we had the bottom of the sixth inning, we had the bases loaded and one out and didn't score that inning. And even in the ninth inning, we had first and second and nobody out and didn't score. So, it was just, and to me, Carlos Beltran is one of the top signings we've had, and hopefully, despite what happens, hopefully gets in the Hall of Fame because he had a great 7-year career with the Mets.
Yeah, and he's very undervalued, and unfortunately, we didn't get to see him coach, but he's never lost a game as a Mets manager, which is
no. I hopefully down the road he gets another chance because Carlos is a good guy. He's a dedicated family man, and I hope he gets a chance to manage someday.
Now, people always give the Mets some slack sometimes saying, oh, well, their farm system's not great, but look at what this farm system provided. You got Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs, who grew up in the outfield at Shea Stadium, and Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz, two superstars coming out of the Mets organization. What do you remember about those youngsters when they were running around taking fly balls?
I remember that Patrick, one game in one of the World Series games, he was shagging fly balls with Mike Hampton. And Mike had told me through the years that he stole a couple of balls from him, and he loved running around. He was a very excited young man, never stood still. And Donovan's son, Donovan Jr., what a nice young man he is. He was around us a lot, and we're so happy for his success. And he does things the right way. And if you notice, Donovan Mitchell made a $12 million contribution to his high school where he came from. And what I like about Pat is he's really active in our alumni now. And people forget that Pat Mahomes in '99 and 2000 had a 13-3 record. He was one of the top pitchers around. Pitched a lot, won a lot of playoff games in '99, and we're really happy for them. We both root for them. All Mets people root for Donovan and Patrick.
Yeah, Donovan, of course. The Cyclones always post pictures of him, and I'm really excited. The Cyclones are going to be high A this season, Jay, and I think that's a great facility for you guys. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more rehab assignments locally now that Brooklyn's full.
Yeah, one good Billy Hart, another good guy, worked for me as a head PR governor now. Yep. Billy does a lot of good work, and always like to see him. Hopefully, they can get started. I mean, really good for them to get started this year because it's really bad for the kids to have another year out. Hopefully that won't happen this year.
Yeah, I worked there in 2015 and worked with Gary Perone very closely, and it's just an amazing place there. Now, you've worked a ton of World Series, not just Mets. Usually, MLB would take you to work the World Series. What are some of the most memorable ones that you worked? Of course, '86 is probably crazy, and the Subway Series in 2000. But other than those two, what ones really stick to your mind?
Yeah, one year when the Marlins beat the Yankees. Uh, we're in Florida, and the shortstop Alex Gonzalez hit a home run, I think, off of Clemens, and late in the game. It was my job to get the star of the game for CBS Radio. So the Marlins were doing a group hug at home plate, and I joined the hug. And as soon as the hug was over, I grabbed Alex Gonzalez for the interview. Another one of my favorite memories in the Blue Jays Phillies World Series. I was in the Phillies dugout when Joe Carter hit the home run, and it was my job to get the game winner. So as soon as he hit the home run, I was the first guy to, maybe the second guy to greet him at home plate. And when he was done celebrating, I dragged him over for the interviews. And I saw Joe Carter recently in an All-Star game a couple of years ago, and my pictures hanging up in his bedroom of me greeting him at a home plate. So those are two of my favorite stories.
That's amazing.
When you just when you said hugs, I just remembered. It came to my mind the guy that jumped the field in the Gary Carter jersey to hug the team when Johan Santana threw the no hitter. That's he's always going to be in that picture there. And I know.
Yeah, he's gonna be involved.
You had to grab Johan for the post game interview, but speaking of that time period, Kevin Burkhardt, did you ever think he'd be such a huge star as he is today?
I did. You know why? Because Kevin Burkhardt treats people the right way. He's all our players loved him because he was down to earth. He wasn't always looking for the sensational stuff. He got along with everybody, and I've kept Kevin contact with Kevin through the years, and he's done some of my he did a podcast with me, did some other things, and Kevin, despite all his success, has got a level head about him and is a real good guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's an outstanding piece of advice. And I'm sure that's how you live every day, and that's how you got through 40 years of your career. And what a career was. Jay, we thank you for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks.
Hopefully, when you do a couple more interviews, we'll have you back on.
I love to.
We can talk about some more player stories. But what we do here, Nick and I, is we always give our guests, to our listeners, the last words. So obviously, you have a book to promote, so you're more than free to do that. If there are any other stories you would like to share, if there's anything else you would like to share to our listeners, go right ahead. This was a lot of fun. We thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the holidays. I hope you have a very happy, healthy, and safe New Year, you and your family.
Yeah, I hope everybody be safe. Listen, one of the reasons I wrote the book was send a message out to kids who are born maybe not perfect, can get go on with life. But if anybody reads my book, hopefully they get that message out, and hope they read the chapter on my dear colleague Shannon Ford, who was a great person, and hopefully her legacy will keep going on for years and years and years. And be safe, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jay. We appreciate it. So that's going to do it here for this episode. Thank you to our very special guest, Jay Horwitz, and of course, Joe Calabrese, my co-host. I am Nick Durst, and this has been I'm Right.